What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Blerd It Out. We got the new chapter, 1121 is out, and we got a good chapter this week, people. A really good chapter. So we're going to cover that. I'm going to talk a little bit about anime seasonals. Really, there's just one that has my eye so far. The rest of them haven't been as alluring as, some of the other previous seasons have been. But to be fair, I haven't checked out as many as I wanted to yet. And we also got a mini update for the new One Piece anime remake. But first, a word from our sponsors. Thank you for tuning in to Blerd It Out. Whether you're listening from YouTube on my channels like Taran King Kuma or Blerd It Out Podcast, or one of the many podcast sites like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more, I appreciate your support. If you want to listen to older episodes of the podcast, head on over to Patreon. If you join as a free member, you can watch all the old episodes from the old seasons for free. Plus, there'll be other content that didn't quite make it to an episode or on a YouTube video that you can check out there as well. Your support means the world. And if you have not caught up to the latest chapters or episodes, please know that there will be spoilers ahead.
Spoilers.
Okay, One Piece this week. So we got the cover of Jump and we got a color spread. Both are popping. So the cover of Jump is One Piece, and it's in honor of the One Piece 27th anniversary for the manga. It looks hype. One of the things I immediately noticed, because we always have this discussion about how Oda draws the women of One Piece. Their faces are constantly the same. And I'm looking at the cover of Jump. I'm looking at Nami's face. And immediately I look at that and I'm like, that's not Nami's face. That is Tama's face. Like, that is clearly a different face than what Nami normally has. And it just makes me think that even though I think there are striking similarities between a lot of the faces that Oda will draw for women, I think certain characters have very distinctive faces that match with the rest of them. Like, if you just take it by face value, then yes, you'll see a lot of similarities, almost like purely identical. If you look at the character as a whole, I think more differences stand out. And that's what I see here. If you look at that cover and you see Nami's face, I feel like you would see it too. I feel like you would see it's more of a character like Tama than it is Nami. Otherwise, I think the cover is really cool. And speaking of the 27th anniversary and One Piece Day, they're going to be making an announcement, I believe, on one of the celebration days about the One Piece anime. I think they're going to be releasing some promotional material about the remake. So we're going to be getting some news on that probably in the upcoming month. So keep an eye out for that. We're definitely going to react to that on the channel because that's big news right there. That's real big news. And on to the color spread because, Oda was cooking. I think one of the things he really likes to do is to superimpose Nami and Robin in a lot of these color spreads because it's been done before. And even this concept of like the characters eating ice cream, in that color spread, he has a few beforehand where it's Nami and Robin superimposed, and you have characters in the background and they're all eating ice cream. Like this, I think this is something that Oda does a lot. Obviously, he loves to draw Nami, and to a slightly smaller degree Robin. And even in, I don't know if it was the last color spread or one of the like one or two previous, is where we had Robin playing chess and she was superimposed. He likes drawing them big. Obviously, he loves drawing this character. I like it's like a shading detail. So sometimes Oda will draw the color spreads in the very similar art style to the manga, where it's like there isn't this much like detail shading across. And obviously this is color, so it's going to look a little bit different. But just the way that the characters are kind of shaded and drawn, it feels a bit more detailed than we'd normally see them. But man, it's fantastic. On to the chapter itself. 1121, The Ebb and Flow of the Ages. Now immediately that title is a callback to I think it's chapter 100, where I want to say Dragon is talking about. Dragon is either talking about or he's talking with the narration of Roger's words, one of which being like the ebb and the flow of the ages, passed down of inherited will. Basically, everything Vegapunk is saying now is something that Roger said previously. And it's interesting because at the end of this chapter, Vegapunk says, is this something that Roger did by coincidence, or did he intentionally, set forth this? And I think we as readers know by this point that Roger intentionally set forth this age of piracy. Roger set it forth. Whitebeard basically reignited a flame that was kind of dying out. And now Vegapunk is doing that same thing where he's igniting a flame, but it's crazy because it's not just a flame that ignites pirates. Vegapunk literally said, everybody. Whoever is the one to reach the One Piece kind of changes the history of the world. So it's like he ignited the flame in anyone who wants to change the fate of the world. It's not just about finding treasure anymore. It's about changing the world from what it is now. So that reaches so many other people that you have the entire world pretty much gunning after the One Piece. But let's go through this step by step. Because we start back with Saturn attacking the Viking ship, trying to take out people. And within that, we see that Bonney is going Gear 5 again. She's got her Nika mode going. And I like the way that... I like the interaction between Luffy and Bonney during these panels because it's very much... Luffy can do this on his own. We've seen Luffy fight pretty much all of these Gorosei in some way, shape, or form, and we know that he can handle himself and he can take care of business with these Gorosei. He sees Bonney transforming into Gear 5, and instead of kind of just doing a straightforward set of attacks, he intentionally makes sure that Bonney can transform so that she can help out. And I like that. I like the reaction panel of Luffy looking down at Bonney because, we think about Gear 5 and we think about it's always just this laughing, this unserious character. I feel like that panel is a very good spot of where Gear 5 Luffy is consciously thinking about something and he's not just, goofing off. He sees Bonney and he's like, okay, let me make sure that she can transform. I know how important this is to her. And I think another thing that's important to point out is that she's somewhat struggling to transform. Like when you see her transforming, you see her kind of like straining and you see her puffing afterwards. So it's clear this isn't an easy transformation, especially since she's done it once already. So this is probably going to be her last time transforming in this period of time because I think she's going to be out of stamina. But she manages to get in the transformation, and this just makes Saturn angry all over again because he can't catch a break. And we cut to Vegapunk. He's still continuing his speech. And at this point, I think a lot of this is... So what he's saying isn't new information. This is the recap of his entire speech pretty much, and kind of a recap of the series thus far. What I think is cool about this is the reaction panels we get with it. Where he says, we know the weapons technology. So he's talking about the ancient weapons. And he shows Shirahoshi and Vivi. So we talk about the ancient weapons and we get these two characters in that particular set of panels. And then we go back to Skypiea and we see Conus. And the exclamation of this is someone shouting that power is out there. Initially, I would think that this is Vegapunk, but it's not in... All of Vegapunk's speech is in the kind of... There's a very special speech bubble for Vegapunk's speech. So that power is out there. When that's said, it's different from every other Vegapunk panel of his speech. So I'm wondering, is that someone in Skypiea saying that? Or is it just because in Skypiea they have a different form of communication? where maybe it's not just a signal, it's like a dial, so it's coded differently. I'm not entirely sure on that. It very well may be that it's not a transponder snail, but a dial, because it still has that outlined border. But I just thought that was interesting to see. And then he moves on to talk about people with rare and unique racial ancestry constantly being persecuted, slaughtered, hunted down to this very day. When he does that, we see panels of Kuma, who's a buccaneer. We actually get a panel of Marco talking to Whitebeard, which is something we saw in Wano, where Whitebeard was talking about how gods lived upon the red line. And we see King, he's a Lunarian. Now, King's all bandaged up. I don't think it really shows us where he is. It just shows that he's bandaged up. Now, last time we saw him, he was being handled by Green Bull, but Green Bull went from Udon to Wano and then left. So unless Green Bull went directly back to like Udon and picked up everybody, which also wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because he didn't even bring a ship with him. I think he did request a ship come through, but it was never shown what he did as he left. So I'm not entirely sure where King is at now. It doesn't seem like he's completely chained up, but then again, they don't really show anything other than like his head and some of his torso. But we also get a look at Pudding, who's still chained up. So she hasn't been freed at all. She's still chained up, probably still on the transport ship. But we know Pudding is part of the Three-Eyed Tribe. So we have all these special races of character kind of getting highlighted, which I think is really cool. Then we're back to Saturn, and Saturn is obviously, like I said, when Bonney transformed, that was enough to just set him off, but now he's attacking Bonney again. And they again make reference to the fact that Bonney is simply copying Nika. She's copying Gear 5. And I don't want to say this is Oda's way of telling the fans that don't worry about Bonney being Gear 5, but I feel like this is a very clear indicator that Bonney going into Gear 5 is not a big deal. Because again, they're saying you're just copying this. You don't fully understand it. It's not a one-to-one. Like you see something and you're like, I want to be that, and so you're being that. That's all this is. Now, Luffy comes in and stops Saturn from hitting her again. And this gives Bonney time to charge up an attack. But we go through a nice little chain of flashback as she's charging up that attack. And a lot of it is Kuma's backstory, but it's a combination of like Kuma's backstory and Bonnie's backstory, where she's like, what you did to my parents is unforgivable. And as she's saying this, we get shots of both Kizaru and Sentomaru, characters we know that are deeply linked to Kuma's backstory. And I think seeing them in this particular part of the chapter is just an indicator of what side they're on, or at least what they're going through. I would say that it's more likely that Sentomaru would defect than it is Kizaru. I think Kizaru may lament what's going on, but eventually he would probably stick with the Marines. I think Sentomaru may defect just because, one, they killed Vegapunk, and two, they're strong arming Kizaru into being the character that he doesn't want to be, I guess. I could very well see Sentomaru defecting or going to Sword, just because it's like, this isn't it. I didn't sign up for all this. And we also get a cool quote from Bonney where she's saying, you dare call yourself a god when real gods exist. I think that's really cool because obviously she's speaking of Nika, but it's just like, the Celestials call themselves gods, but in a way, they're just mimicking what they saw. So with the way Saturn talked to her is kind of how she's talking back, where you call yourself a god, but you're obviously just mimicking these real gods. And she says real heroes too, and we get a panel of Kuma, and he's still like busted up and expressionless, like it sucks, but it changes later. It changes later, and that's one of my favorite parts of the chapter. But Bonnie's saying all she ever wanted to do is live with her family, and it it's very sad because she says being alone for so long made me want to die, but I kept going. And it's like when you think about her backstory and how one, she basically like waited for Kuma to say something to her after he left for so long, and then she just ended up never hearing from him again, never seeing him again. But she kept persevering through that, just to get going, just to get to the end and see what was there for her. And you see how far she's come through everything, through dealing with the government, through dealing with piracy, and she's made it here to this point where she is now able to conjure up the same power that her dad spoke so highly of. I think the Bonney kind of story in itself of Egghead has had such a good, complete cycle where we see the beginning and the end, and it all comes together so masterfully. I think Bonney is so well done. I absolutely love it. And now we're getting a combo attack. We're getting a combo Gear 5 Nika hockey attack. But before that lands, we get a few more words from Vegapunk. And at this point, he's more of referencing what Whitebeard said, which is when the One Piece is found, we're going to get answers and we're going to get a war. So he's saying, be ready for it because it's going to happen. This new era has brought forth a time in which we will see the finding of the One Piece. And then we get the combination attack. And this is odd because this is one of the very few times where Luffy does not call out an attack. I can't remember the last time Luffy has done like a serious attack, a major attack, and hasn't named it. I mean, this looks like just a Gatling version of, I don't know, would this be White Star Gun? I'm not sure. It's a Gatling version of a Gear 5 punch. But basically he uses it to stack onto Bonney's Nika punch. Bonney just has like the Gear 3 hockeyed up punch, and then Luffy kind of punches with it. So I think in a way it's just Bonney's attack that Luffy's supplementing, which is why he didn't necessarily give it a name, but it's cool nonetheless. And this is enough to break Saturn up and launch him off the ship. And again, this isn't going to be lasting damage, even with hockey. Like, Saturn is going to be able to put himself back together. And you can even tell, like, as he's flying away, as he's broken apart, his body is in wisps. Whenever he takes serious damage and his body breaks off, it breaks off in wisps. So that stuff will just repair itself. Interesting to note, he is headed for the ocean. Now, we had the discussion last time about Mercury jumping into the water. It looks like Saturn is about to fall in the water as well. So I'm wondering, could this be a point where we see if they truly have a water weakness? Will they have to rescue him from the water? Will he be able to get out by himself? I think we might get an answer for that. And if they have true Dofu powers, or if there's something else going on. So I'm excited to see that. That's going to be cool. I guess I should say I hope we see it. I hope that doesn't get kind of dusted under the rug, because that's pretty important. But we get to the best part of the chapter, in my opinion, which is where everyone's cheering, Bonnie's crying. You get a panel of Kuma, and you can see that his expression has changed, if only slightly. It has changed, and it looks like he's trying to smile pretty much. Basically, he just saw his daughter and Sun God Nika fighting together. And this is one of the things I was talking about when Bonney first changed. And when we saw Kuma's reaction, I was like, I really hope we can get some kind of expression out of him. This is what I wanted right here. Even if it's not like a full-on smile, this is definitely a different expression than what he's been wearing for the past few chapters. So I'm so happy to see that. I think that indicates there is some little tiny speck of Kuma humanity in there. I don't know if we'll get any more than that, but I'm just happy to see that much. And in addition to that, the Sunny is currently flying overhead, which means it's going to land in the water soon. I'm guessing they're going to do something to soften the landing, either from the Viking ship, or it looks like Zoro is prepping to do something. So Zoro might try to unleash some slashes to break up the tension. I honestly think this would be a good time for Usopp to do something. Usopp has a lot of tools that can soften the impact of certain blows. Like he has, I forget exactly what it's called, but it basically is a trampoline bubble type plant that when it hits, it creates a bubble that you can jump off of. If he could shoot that into the water a couple times and like create just a soft landing pad, they'd be fine. But I also still want to see if Frankie did include some kind of special gadgets in the ship itself. I think it's also cool to note that there's a little bit of damage in the panel where we see Usopp, Chopper, and Jinbei. There's a little bit of damage there. And that is, I'm almost positive that's where Lilith got punched in the head, because it kind of broke the ship up a little bit. I think that's really cool to see in this chapter because it's just continuity. Like, Oda didn't have to include that at all because, you know, you see that, you don't even think about it. I literally just saw it on a reread and I was like, wait a minute, is that from Lilith? I just think that's a really cool detail to include in there for no reason other than being cool. Continuing down, you know, we still got some reactionary panels. We're getting the vibes of Roger's first speech, and we even get the panel where he says, "My treasure, it's yours to find." So we get the OG Roger speech, and we get people cheering for it again. Basically, we're getting this revamp of the search for the One Piece. And this is where I was talking about it's more than just pirates. Because initially we're looking at Hachinosu, we're looking at, you know, the Red Force, we're going through all these reactions of pirates. And we even get some Cross Guild. And it's funny because in Cross Guild, both Mihawk and Crocodile are not happy. Because the crew of Cross Guild wants to go after the One Piece. Mihawk and Crocodile, they more or less don't care about the One Piece. Like, I think Mihawk especially doesn't care. And you can see in his face, because he's completely frowning. He just looks like, oh, I don't want to do this. Crocodile always looks like this. So I don't think he's any more upset than he normally is. But Mihawk definitely doesn't want to do this. Well, we get to the Navy headquarters, and even the Marines are like, we can't just sit by. We'll go find it first. We'll go get the One Piece. And like someone says, you know, we can't do that because we have to protect people. But the fact that you have even Marines being like, wait, why don't we go get it? Why don't we go after the One Piece? That's new. I like that touch because it shows that we've extended past the world of Marines and pirates. This is a race to change the world. And then we get the final panel. And this final panel, I'm almost 100% positive, is the final panel that shows the last big players in the series. So these are the people that are going to decide the ending of the series. And you have the Yonko up top, which I think is telling us, I think the Yonko are the biggest obstacle left in the series. Like, obviously we have Akainu and the Marines, but honestly, I would put the Yonko as higher threats than Akainu and the Marines. Because we look at it, it's Blackbeard, it's Shanks, and it's Cross Guild. I would rather fight Akainu and the Marines than any of those factions. Because what are you doing against Blackbeard, a 2 devil fruit user with an army of legit fruit users? Shanks, who's basically mandatory top 3 at this point. Buggy and Cross Guild, who has Mihawk, who is a rival to Shanks and the world's strongest swordsman. Then you have Luffy with his God Fruit. And it's like, okay, well, you know, I'm not really worried about the Marines as far as these Yonko. Nothing, they're not a threat, just I think there's a hierarchy to the levels of threat. The Yonko are first, then comes, the Marines, the world government, then comes the outlying factors like people like the God Knights. Interesting enough in this panel, there's two silhouettes. One is Emu, who has been silhouetted since introduction, so that's not new. There is a new person silhouetted, and they bear a striking resemblance to Shanks. And I guess resemblance is used lightly because they are silhouetted, but just like the structure of the body seems very Shanks-like. And at first I thought that was Shanks, but then I was like, wait a minute, Shanks is in the Yoko panel. That can't be him. Plus, also they're using their left hand, which Shanks doesn't have, so yeah, it's not Shanks. But they have a cutlass, or what looks to be a cutlass, which is what, Shanks and Roger used. Just an odd time to, I guess, introduce a new silhouetted character. An odd time. We're at the very end of the series and you still have new characters that you're silhouetting. But Oda loves silhouettes, so I guess we shouldn't be too surprised. I also think that the paneling for this particular scene has deeper importance to it. Because you have like even if you look at the Yonko panel, you have Buggy and you have Shanks on the outside. Now we know the history between Buggy and Shanks, but the fact that on Buggy's side is Mihawk, I think also adds to that these two are going to be conflicting parties. And then on the inner panel, you have Blackbeard and Luffy, who are obviously going to be conflicting parties. You scroll down and you see on the very outer edges, Sabo, Akainu. So revolutionary, Marines, but also, the will of Ace kind of being killed up by Akainu, picked up by Sabo. I think that kind of lives there. The interesting part is the inner ones, namely Kobe and Emu. Because what is that about? Why, Emu being such a big figure, why is Emu, I guess, slated right there with Kobe? And I think all three of the inner ones can be a little confusing because there is no direct correlation. Now, a lot of people are saying the silhouetted figure could be part of the God Knights, considering Garling is on one side and then the silhouetted one's on the other side, but in the same space. I could see that. But I think we could do some deep diving into this panel alone and get some new information. But that's a chapter, and we are on break, unfortunately. Now, this chapter was, for me, this chapter felt like a true One Piece chapter. There was a lot of recap. There wasn't a lot of motion in certain aspects. When you think about it, as far as like progression goes, we really didn't go anywhere. At the end of last chapter, the Sunny launched off, of Egghead. And in this chapter, it hasn't even landed yet. It's still in the air, and we can still see the explosion in the air. So like, time-wise, it really hasn't moved at all. Honestly, it's only a couple seconds, maybe some minutes at best of time progression. But like, just content and feel-wise, it had a lot. It had a lot. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm excited to see the next chapter. This, I wouldn't necessarily call it a cliffhanger, to be honest, because I think this was a cohesive chapter in which it wrapped itself up. We didn't leave on a cliffhanger of, is Vegapunk going to say something? Is someone going to do something? Is there a attack charging up? We really just ended on a really clean panel. And I feel like we can go on break and this isn't a speculative break. This is more of just like a theory crafting break, which I appreciate. Be expecting a video on Egghead come come break week, I'm probably going to do it on the main channel, Tarek and Kuma, so check that out. But before we go, I just want to talk about one particular seasonal anime that I have started watching, which is Wistoria. Wistoria, I believe it's Wistoria, A Will of Wand and Sword. I believe that's the full name. But if you've seen like Mashle, if you've seen Danmachi, it's anime that's a mix of some of these tropes where basically there's a kid who was enrolled into a school of magic that can't use magic. But instead of being able to use magic, he's got these other abilities, which kind of include like superhuman strength, analyzation, sword skill. Like he has these other abilities that make him more of a warrior than a mage, but he's at a mage school and he's trying to become a top mage, even though he doesn't use magic. Premise wise, it sounds pretty, run of the mill. Like I said, this is kind of what Mashle's story is, but instead of muscles, throwing a sword. That's the biggest change. But for me, I was immediately captured to it. Like Will as a character, I think is really interesting. They snapped off with the animation in the first episode. I don't know what they were thinking, but they really wanted you to be locked into the series. Now one of the things I was like, they can't continue this animation for the entirety of the series, because they're not. I don't even know who it's animated by. I know it's not Ufotable, it's not Mappa, it's not Kyoto, it's not one of the big animation studios. So I don't think they would keep up the animation the entire time. And even in the second episode, you can tell that the animation has, I don't want to say dipped, because it's not that it was bad quality. They just didn't do as many peaks as they did in the first one. In the first one, they would animate, like there's a scene where Will's getting ready to look through his notebook, and he has this entire dramatic scene where he swings his arms around to pull out his notebook. That's animated so well. But in the second episode, they keep the good animation to the important parts, and then the other parts are just well animated. But like, I'm only 2 episodes in, and this series has captured me pretty well so far. I like the premise. I like the character so far. I want to see where this is going. I want to see how it lines up with Mashle. And the only reason I say Mashle is just because the premise is similar. I think Mashle, as far as a story goes, is more suited to comedy, and it's fun. You watch Mashle for fun. And I think Wistoria is more, it's going for a story-based adventure than it is a fun-based adventure. Like, we're going to be in this for the story of Will and Alfaria. That's why we're here. And I was thinking about that. I was like, I like Mashle. Mashle's fun. I don't remember exactly why Mash went to the magic school. I know that there was an officer, ran into his dad. I can't remember the plot of like the first 1 or 2 episodes as to why Mash has to go to this school. And I was like, that's kind of an indicator of how I see these 2 stories, where it's like, I have fun watching Mash. The story doesn't capture me as much as just like the humor, the comedy that they insert into the series is why I watch Mash, the fun. Whereas with Wistoria, I feel like I'm going to be more invested in the story, which is something I personally like when it comes to an anime. I like to be invested in the story. I like to want to know what's going to happen next, not just watch it to watch. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm very excited about this. I'm going to try and catch a few more seasonals. Like I said, there really hasn't been any others that caught my eye like Wistoria did. But if I do catch some, I'll let you guys know. As always, like, comment, subscribe, smash the like button. Let me know what you guys thought. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.